My name's Greg Pinneo, and we are sitting in a studio that we have developed at the hangar. Many of you have been to the hangar, and I say that not knowing how many people will be watching this, so let me say it differently. This hangar has been open twice a year for quite a long time, in the spring and in the fall. We call it a day at the hangar. And everybody who's ever been to the hangar knows that there's guidelines. I come short of saying rules, but there's guidelines to the hangar. The hangar's kind of a sacred place. And in so, there's no small talk at the hangar. As we're launching into this podcast, I would like our conversation to be important, useful, something that causes contemplation and processing. The hangar is gated. I think you could jump the fence and break in if you wanted to, but to me, the gate represents that not only what the hangar is that we want inside the gate, but what we really don't want at the hangar or in our lives. No proclaimed assholes at the hangar. We do our best to weed them out. No takers. No tight pants are welcome. The arrogant ones. And I suppose we're all that in one sense or another. And because of that, if you are that, but aspire to change, aspire to be better, aspire to be different, then the hangar is for you. All are welcome who truly want to grow, who truly want to strive to live an extraordinary life. Why are we doing this podcast? Boy, I got to tell you, I've asked myself that 1,000 times. I have been told for as long as I can remember in my adult life that somehow, some way, I see the world differently through a different lens. I'm an introvert, no question about it. But I'm an introvert that has been brought forward out of a cause of purpose, a sense of urgency to live, a desire to make a contribution. I do my best to get out of my own way. My hope for this podcast is that it is a place where there's important conversation, candid conversation about life and business and success and failure, a deep and important conversation on how we think, on what we do, and maybe more importantly, why we do it. And my hope is that in some way I'm able to make a contribution to that process of thinking, that process of reconciliation and working it out and trying to find the best answers as we all do. My hope is that my contribution and the amazing contribution that you will see from the guests that I interview here, that somehow those podcasts will provide challenge and insight, and that the thinking will open doors and cause conversation among couples and friends and groups of people, all in the hopes that the bar gets pushed toward a better, a higher, a more abundant, a more full life for yourself and therefore the world around you. That's my hope. When I think in terms of being prepared to do this, I think of the blessings of my life and the people that have really formed me. I have one brother who's almost 2 years older than I am, and I will tell you that we are in unison in saying that we were blessed with two amazing parents. My mom and dad never had dads that they ever met. And my mom and dad were raised by mothers who had serious alcoholism issues. And as a result, they had very, very, very challenging childhoods. They were survivors. They learned to get things done and learned to navigate in ways most kids don't and ways most kids shouldn't have to know. But when they became parents at a very, very young age, they threw themselves in to my brother and I. We did everything together. We worked hard. We played hard. But we were together all the time. When I think of mentors and influences, I can't say that sentence without thinking about my parents. But along the way, there were three other individuals who, when I think in terms of formation of thought and influence, and wow, the first being Mr. A.B. Label. He inherited me as kind of a surrogate grandson when I was about 8 years old. I had no grandfather, and he figured that out, and he approached me, and he asked if he could apply for the job. And I said, wow, that would be great. And he said, well, then we have a deal. And he put his hand out, said, let's shake on that. And I can tell you that A.B. Label is, to this day, the kindest person I've ever met in my life. His care and kindness just jumped off the page. But as I got to know him in my later teen years and in my adult years, the contribution that I think in terms of A.B. is that he is a philosopher. He puts everything about life in metaphors that I could understand. Stories of life and what I call now isms. A.B. was full of conclusions of thought, his personal philosophy that he would pass on to me. And every gem he ever threw my way, I savored like a piece of butterscotch candy. I'm telling you, amazing in his thinking. Early in my career, I stumbled upon a gentleman named Tom Newman. Tom was about a decade older than I, and Tom's gift was left brain finance deal structuring. Tom's brain was not normal. It wasn't right. It was brilliant. It was genius. He was the world's worst teacher. I had to extract every inch of knowledge out of him painfully. But as I watched his mind work, I learned and saw what he saw. Unfortunately, Tom's life did not last long. But those years I had with Tom Newman, wow, to watch his finance mind, it connected with me. I understood it. And what a blessing to have his mentorship. And the third in this trifecta milkshake of influence was through just incredible serendipity meeting Dr. Michael Shadow. My freshman year at the University of Washington, I mistakenly was put in a non-freshman class titled The Rhetoric of Western Thought. I remember looking at that on my first little go-to 15 credit first quarter list and thought, oh my gosh, I can't think of anything that sounds more boring than the rhetoric of Western thought. Didn't know what it meant, had no interest or aspiration to whatever this seemed to be until the moment I met the instructor, Dr. Michael Shadow. And I was captivated, completely captivated. And that initial captivation was almost 50 years ago. And I want to be the first to tell you that I will have the privilege, because we've stayed close friends all these years, of interviewing Dr. Michael Shadow right here on this podcast. Dr. Michael Shadow is one of the world's greatest teachers in the art form of negotiation, understanding the process of agreement. Wow. Well, when you put it all together between my parents, A.B. Label, Tom Newman, and Dr. Michael Shadow, what I didn't really realize was that I was being formed to have a mind, a toolbox, and an incentive that was perfectly fit for being a real estate entrepreneur. And when I bought my first house, I was completely obsessed. I've been buying real estate for nearly 50 years. I can't believe I'm saying that. I've never had a job. It's all I've ever done. From when I was 17 years old till today, this is my professional life, my passion, my pursuit. I've been teaching deal structuring, acquisition, finance, and negotiation at a university level for over 40 years. And that journey has been unbelievable. I have always considered myself an aspiring student. The beauty of real estate entrepreneurship, metaphorically, is much like the passion of aviation that I have, is that aviation starts with the 172 Cessna, and then, of course, there's the space shuttle, and they're both airplanes. And yet the learning and the growth, the technology and the challenge is never ending. It's a lifetime of growth, and real estate entrepreneurship has been that for me. I've been so blessed to be a part of this journey for so long, and somehow that forming with these mentors made me fit for the task, and I've been passionate about it my entire life. I want to grow every day. Growth is the grail. Sameness is the enemy. You'll hear me say that on and on and on. As well, I hope to have an impact on people along the way and share some of what I've learned in the last 50 years. I'm a student of not just what we do, but how we think. My real estate acquisition resume is multifaceted. Slice it any way you want, but I feel as though I've done so many things under this incredible umbrella of real estate entrepreneurship. Land development, multifamily construction, mixed-use construction, commercial construction, waterfront properties, single-family custom homes, nightly rentals, midterm rentals, vacation rentals, parking lots, marinas, condominiums, airplane hangars, you name it. The list goes on, and the product types, the projects, the countless negotiations. And perhaps more importantly, over the many years, just the endless number of lessons that I've learned by doing. I have been the first guy in the door pretty much my whole life. And way back when, the term creative real estate, well, there were a couple of us that aspired to not just learn it, but do it. If I haven't invented it, I've certainly been a test pilot among those first who have tried things. And of course, when you're a test pilot, sometimes the wings fall off and you write a report on what happened and where and when. And then you put new wings on and you go again. In the last 11 years, I've had the privilege of delivering a lecture every week to a membership that we call Capital Club. CAPITAL is an acronym, Committed Arena Participants in Thought and Life. Has nothing to do with money. It's an acronym. And Capital Club is a membership group, people who paid to be part of these weekly lectures that I've given. And I delivered 541 episodes of Capital Club. Kind of makes my head shake just thinking about it. In part, this podcast is an extension of that. Technology and platforms and all of the way people connect and learn and grow has changed. And we've been encouraged so many times, I can't tell you, by students, by friends to get on board with changing platforms. Many of that encouragement has come from Capital Club members. What a privilege that experience has been, and the interaction, the camaraderie, the exchange I've been able to have with the members of Capital Club for all these years. It's been one of the greatest things of my life every week to correspond and connect with and exchange with Capital Club members. They're students and friends of mine, and I so appreciate that chapter. But what we're doing now is distinctly different. It's distinctly different because Capital Club was a closed group of friends and students that knew me and I knew them. And now, with this very first episode, we've made a decision to step across the threshold and walk into a very, very, very different audience. It's the audience of the world. It's any and everybody who has a cell phone can now dial in and become part of what we're doing. And with that, well, I think I know a little bit about what I'm getting into. The world is full of critics. And if you are a critic, my life will represent an all-you-can-eat buffet. I've been to prison. I've been divorced. I've been sued, and I have sued. I've had personal disputes, partnership disputes. I've been investigated by the Department of Financial Institutions. I've been wealthy, and I've been bankrupt. I've slept in a custom built-in bed made of clear fur in an $8 million house that I built. And I've slept on a concrete ledge in a jail cell. If someone wants to throw stones at me, I'm a big billboard that you could hit blindfolded. You don't have to look far to criticize my life. But I will tell you this, that I have spent my life in the arena. In the arena. You know the arena, like in Rome, where they throw you out there in the dirt and here come the lions. The arena is not a safe place. It's a place without a comfort zone. It's a place with one way in and one way out. It's a place of failure and defeat. You can get eaten there in the arena. It's a place of standing, of making a point, of holding your ground, a place to make a statement. It's a place that is fear-inducing, and yet where you still choose to be there because the alternative is just not acceptable. Teddy Roosevelt put it in the most eloquent words ever penned. And he directed his thoughts to the critics. Teddy Roosevelt said, "It's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbled or how the doer of deeds could have done it better. The credit belongs to the man who is in the arena, who strives valiantly, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows the triumph of high achievement, and at worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place will never be among cold, timid souls who know neither victory or defeat. In the future, when we encounter a drive-by critic, our comment to them will simply be, please take the time to listen to podcast 0. Because it's there that we were ready for you. We were ready for you. Our philosophy regarding the critic goes deep. I have been told that I am a savant, whatever that means. I've been told countless times that I've changed people's lives. I've also been told that I'm a piece of shit. And you know, maybe if you put it all in a bucket, there are parts of truth in all of that. Aren't we all a little bit of extraordinary and a little bit of fallen. What I know for sure is that people are drawn to me or they reject me. There doesn't seem to be a middle ground. What I'm sure of for myself is that I'm a driver. I'm a never say die spirit. I'm a realist with a hopeful twist. My strong suit is that I get back up. I have 7 kids. I have 2 grandkids. So far, that's where I'm at. I hope to be a positive contribution in all of their lives, but I suppose the jury's still out on that one. I'm always trying to understand myself. And I think you should always try to understand yourself and the world around you. I believe in growth, and growth, as we know, is painful. I don't know if you were like me, but I remember being a 12, 13-year-old kid literally growing, and my knees, oh my God, they would hurt like I couldn't even tell you. Growing pains, they would call it. Well, isn't growth always painful? And growth usually is accelerated by challenge and adversity. And I believe that growth is the grail, which means you better learn to love what most people won't tolerate. You better learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable if you truly want to grow. Mediocrity makes me sick. It absolutely makes me sick. Hot or cold, in or out, but this middle ground. I believe the greatest betrayal to yourself and to anyone else is an attitude, this attitude of indifference. Nothing more painful than I don't really care. In or out. I have 2 gears. 1,000% in or not at all. Period. I'm a Christian. Some would have a hard time getting their head around that. But I am. And I deeply appreciate God's grace, God's direction, His forgiveness, His blessing. I don't understand sometimes what I feel I'm asked to do. I don't understand my life sometimes. But I look at the life of someone like Moses, who felt completely unqualified for the job, and yet he did what he was told. And he was a great leader. And I'm inspired by the mad one, the reckless, like David, who despite being a mad one, despite being reckless in nature and rebellious in nature, he kept back, coming time and time again, wanting to grow with a heart for God. I appreciate those two. I think on them often. Thinking about this podcast, I have been slow to sign on. I have felt this calling for many years, But I've been slow to sign on. And it's not for fear of the critic. But in full transparency, I'll tell you that the anti-you has really, really, really been doing everything he can to keep this day from happening. And the anti-you fills your head with, who the hell are you to be doing something like this? Really? You're an introvert. You putting yourself out there to the world? Ha! Give me a break. And who do you think you are? Are you Rogan? Are you Shapiro? Are you Cynic? Are you Peterson? I mean, really? And boy, I'll tell you, I go to battle with the anti-you, but I haven't had quite a battle like this one in a while. And I'll tell you that great people get attacked by the anti-you. And I think on Whitman going through something so similar, right? Trying to figure this thing of life out. And, oh me, oh life, right? He's screaming, who am I among these? I've thought that same exact thing. But like Whitman, I've settled into the same answer. His answer. That you are here. That life exists. And identity, your individual, God-created, one-off identity. That the powerful play goes on and you can contribute a verse. I don't have to understand everything to know that this is what I should be doing. And so with a lot of humility, here we are. Just me, talking to you. And I'll give you my best. I can tell you that this podcast will not be a how-to class. This podcast is no substitute for the hardcore ground school of finance, acquisition, negotiation, deal structuring. It won't be that class. I have that class. I have that forum that took me a lot of effort to create, a forum, an intensive called Power Players that I've taught 36 times. I've been so blessed to have 36 groups of 50 students sign up to be a part of that intensive. And boy, do we get to it. I'm blessed to know finance. I'm blessed to know deal structuring and negotiation. This podcast isn't where I'll be teaching that. But I will tell you this, I've been encouraged to do this podcast by those powerful players, and I'm so blessed to know them. And you will meet many of them because I'll be interviewing many of them. A parent doesn't hope that their kids do as well as they do. A parent aspires to eat the dust of their children. Well, guess what? I've got 1,800 children in this country, and I eat their dust every day. And I'm excited for you, the world, to know them. There isn't a city in this country that I can't tell you who I've been blessed to teach and who's stirring it up there. And so with their strength and their power and they're pushing me to overcome the anti-you, this podcast is beginning. But it won't be a technical left brain intensive. That's what Power Players is. what this podcast will be, I hope. I hope it will be a transparent conversation. And the intent of that conversation is to educate, to challenge, and to inspire growth and change. I will share with you directly stories of my life that I hope do that. I will interview extraordinary people, and they'll let you into their story and their life. I will speak at times in metaphor, in parable, in forms of allegory, so that the lessons that I hope to convey will be rememberable through story, through metaphor. Every podcast forthcoming will begin with a word study, a word of great endeavor. And every podcast will end with a challenge to consider a thought, to consider a philosophy, to consider. And it seems apropos that we have to have some basic rules in this podcast to build from. And so I'd like to throw out for your consideration the foundational principles that I believe in that will guide everything we do in this podcast. Lean in and see if you agree with me. Foundational principle number 1. Everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. In a world of Photoshop and happiness and everything looks perfect, the one thing for sure that I know is that there isn't a life out there that isn't fighting a battle that you know nothing about. It's not that you're just not in the know. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you don't understand what they're dealing with because you haven't been there. And when you consider that reality, it creates a birth of empathy and grace that should come around people. Have you ever dealt with this or that? Maybe not. And when the answer is no, I haven't, then you don't know. And therefore you should create a wider birth of grace and empathy. You become a student. You listen. You don't judge. Everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. I believe that. At my core, I believe that. The second foundational principle that I want you to consider is that there is a battle out there happening right now between the you, the real you, and the anti-you. I'll spend a whole hour on that. But those two voices in your head, one your advocate, the goal of the anti-you is sameness. And that's why sameness is the enemy. The third thing I'd like you to think on is that you are a one of one. You're an original. There is no other one like you. And you have a verse, a perfectly scripted verse in the powerful play, as Whitman would say. What's that verse? I hope this podcast helps you identify, embrace, and live your verse. I'd like to put a bow on podcast 0, as we will do everyone in the future, to ask you to consider something. And today, I'd like you to consider the philosophy of counterintuitive wisdom. Let me explain. Does it ever seem to you that the very, very best opportunity, the direction you're called to go, always seems to show itself at the worst time? What is that dichotomy? It's just a complete coincidence that always happens? Or is it a clue to this is the road to the most valuable of philosophies? I believe it's a clue. I can tell you right now, right this minute, day one of podcast, it couldn't happen at a more inappropriate and inopportune time in my life. I couldn't think of a time in my life less reasonable or appropriate to be taking any message to the world. But what I've learned is that usually means you're doing the right thing by doing it, by going anyway, by overcoming the forces that are trying to overcome you. Counterintuitive wisdom says when you think you have to sell something, it's probably time to buy something. Counterintuitive wisdom says when you feel like pulling back, that's the time to extend yourself. When you want to say no, the right answer is yes. When you want to say stay, the right answer is go. Counterintuitive wisdom challenges us on so many levels because our normal instinct is usually a reaction based in fear. And wisdom and fear don't coexist. The right way is not reactive or based in fear. The right way is calm, strong, and based in passion, based in purpose, based in calling. And yet it goes against our normal thinking so often. Consider the wisdom that says, if you want to be rich, you've got to be poor. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 0 of the Greg Pinneo Podcast. I look forward to a long journey ahead. God bless you.